The memory of that day is still vivid in my mind, as if it happened yesterday. My 10-year-old daughter, with her curious and innocent eyes, looked directly at me and asked, "Mummy, why did only my cousin get a present from Grandma?" At that moment, I felt my heart tighten. It was a simple question, but one loaded with so many layers of feelings and misunderstandings. The truth is, I didn't know how to answer. Our family gatherings were always filled with laughter and conversations, but often hid small tensions that few noticed. My mother, a woman of few words and restrained gestures, always had a peculiar way of showing affection. I grew up accustomed to that, but seeing my daughter questioning it made me realize how painful these nuances could be. Many people feel exactly this, a sense that love and affection are tied to material acts, and when those acts are unequal, the pain can be profound. That day was like any other Sunday lunch until the present moment. My niece received a beautiful gift, and everyone around smiled and applauded. And this is where things get interesting. My daughter looked at me, waiting for me to explain what seemed inexplicable. She didn't cry or throw a tantrum, she just waited, with that pure confidence that only children have. But there's a detail that changes everything. I never wanted her to feel the same insecurity that I felt in my childhood. "I don't know either, dear," was all I could say at the moment, trying to hide my own confusion while hugging my daughter. In that hug, I silently promised that I would try to understand, that I would seek a way to balance things without causing hurt. But how do you explain to a child that love isn't always shown fairly? If you've experienced something similar, you know what I'm talking about. That night, while putting my daughter to bed, I reflected on what I could do. It is worth reflecting on this. How do we protect our children from injustices we cannot control? I knew I needed to talk to my mother, not to demand explanations, but to understand her perspective. I didn't want my daughter to carry the hurt that I had carried for years. The next day, I called my mother. The conversation was delicate, full of pauses and hesitations. She told me about her own insecurities, how she sometimes felt closer to one granddaughter because of small shared moments that I hadn't noticed. It was a moment of revelation. I realized that my mother also had her own pains and ways of dealing with them, often in ways I hadn't understood before. After that conversation, I returned home with a new understanding. I explained to my daughter that Grandma's love wasn't measured by gifts, that everyone has their own way of showing affection. I told her about the stories of my childhood, the times I felt the same way, and how I learned to value the moments when I felt loved in other ways. She smiled and, even without fully understanding, accepted it. This point deserves our attention. How small gestures and words can have such a significant impact on our lives. I learned that it's important to create a space where our children can express their doubts and insecurities, and where we can seek answers to difficult questions together. Sometimes the simple fact of being present is enough to show that they are safe and loved. If this story has touched you, perhaps it's time to look at the family dynamics around you and reflect on how we can be more understanding and loving. And if you've been through a similar situation, you know that the path to understanding is made of small steps and a lot of patience. That morning, while we were having coffee, my daughter surprised me by asking, "Mommy, do you think Grandma will love me more if I do something special for her?" This question caught me off guard, and I realized that even after our conversation, she still carried that doubt. It's curious how children's feelings are deep and often complex, even when they seem simple. "Have you thought about this before?" I asked her, trying to understand better what was going on in her mind. She told me how she saw in a cartoon that gestures of love were often rewarded with other gestures of affection. Such a pure and straightforward logic, but one that doesn't always apply to real life. You know, dear, love is more about being present and taking care of each other than about what we do or give. Grandma loves you for who you are, not for what you do, I said, trying to bring comfort. Often we adults forget that children also face their own emotional dilemmas, and it's crucial that we stay attentive to help them navigate these uncharted waters. But there's something we can do together, I continued, trying to turn the situation into something positive. We can create special moments with Grandma that go beyond gifts. Maybe we can write a letter or draw something that represents what you feel. My daughter loved the idea. We spent the afternoon drawing and writing. Each stroke and word carried a little piece of her childlike heart. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning. When we gave the present to my mother, I saw her eyes fill with emotion. She held the drawing carefully as if it were a treasure and hugged my daughter with a tenderness that words couldn't express. In that moment, something changed between us, a silent understanding that transcended generations. Over the following weeks, I began to notice small changes. My mother was becoming more open, more willing to participate in moments that previously went unnoticed. And my daughter, in turn, seemed more secure, more confident in her relationship with her grandmother. It's interesting how relationships can transform when we allow space for dialogue and mutual understanding. And this is where things become truly significant. I realized that, in seeking answers for my daughter, I also found answers for myself. I relived moments from my childhood, recontextualized memories, and, in a way, healed old wounds. If you've ever experienced something similar, you know how liberating it is to transform old hurts into new understandings. When I think of that Sunday, I no longer see a scene of inequality or injustice, but a starting point for a journey of reconciliation and growth. And it's worth reflecting on this. How often the challenges we face with our children can be opportunities to revisit our own stories and find healing in them. One day, while we were walking in the park, my daughter suddenly stopped and said, "Mummy, I love when Grandma tells me stories about when you were little. It seems like she's discovering new things about you too." I smiled, feeling a quiet joy. These small daily revelations, these shared discoveries, are what truly matter. And so our family dynamic began to change. Not in a drastic way, but in small details that would go unnoticed by inattentive eyes. We started to value more the shared stories, the simple moments like cooking together or just being present for each other. The true magic was in the connection we created, in the love that flowed freely, without the need to be measured or weighed by gifts. If this story resonates with you, perhaps it's time to pay more attention to the relationships around you. Each family has its own stories, its own complexities, but all have the potential to transform when we look with love and understanding. And so, we continue building a legacy of love and empathy, one day at a time. In the end, I realized that love does not need to be explained, but lived. And it is this experience that teaches us, that transforms us. If there is one thing I want my daughter to carry with her, it is the certainty that true love is the one that is present, that welcomes, that cares, and above all, understands. The next morning, while the sun was still timidly lighting up the kitchen, my daughter and I sat down for breakfast. It was one of those simple moments, yet rich in meaning, where the quietness of the house allowed our thoughts to wander freely. I looked at her, so small, and at the same time so full of wisdom, and wondered how many other lessons we would still learn together. "Do you think Grandma was always like this?" she suddenly asked, her soft voice breaking the welcoming silence. I thought for a moment, remembering the stories my mother had told me about her own childhood. "I think we all change over time, dear," I replied, trying to convey the complexity of life in simple words. Grandma also had her struggles and her joys, and that made her who she is today. This point deserves our attention. How each of us carries a whole world of experiences that shape our actions and reactions. Often we forget that the generations that came before us also faced their own challenges. "You know, I've wondered too how Grandma became the person we know today," I confessed, creating a bridge between our curiosities. That afternoon, we decided to visit my mother, bringing a cake that we had baked together. Upon arriving, we found my mother in the garden, tending to her plants with the same care she always devoted to the family. When she saw us, her face lit up with a genuine smile. "You arrived at the perfect time," she said, pointing to a bench under the shade of a tree. "Come, I want to tell you a story." Sitting there, we listened to my mother talk about her childhood, about how the hardships taught her to value simple moments and the importance of unconditional love. She told us about her mother, my grandmother, and how her ways of showing love were different from ours, but no less profound. It's as if each generation writes a chapter of this story that is our family, she reflected, and I felt an even stronger connection between us. As we listened, I realized that these stories were more than memories. They were living lessons that guided us on our own path. My daughter, with her bright and curious eyes, seemed to absorb every word, understanding that love and comprehension are passed down from generation to generation. Does this remind you of any situation? I asked her, knowing that these stories also resonated with the experiences we shared. In the days that followed, I began to notice how my daughter was more interested in listening and learning about the past. She often asked about specific moments from my childhood, trying to trace an invisible line that connected all the women in our family. "It's incredible how we are part of something so big," she commented once, as we flipped through an old photo album. This realization brought a new understanding of the importance of our family stories. They are not just records of the past, but guides that help us understand who we are and where we are going. It is worth reflect on this, I thought, as I watched my daughter explore with such enthusiasm the roots that sustain us. Over time, our family gatherings began to take on a new significance. They were no longer just social meetings, but opportunities to share and celebrate our history. And gradually, the tensions that once hung in the air gave way to an atmosphere of acceptance and love. The transformation did not happen all at once, but in small gestures and moments that, together, created a new foundation for our family. One day, as we were talking at the table, my mother looked at my daughter and said, "You made me see things I couldn't see before. Thank you for that." It was a moment of mutual recognition where the barriers dissolved and allowed us to see each other with more clarity and compassion. And so, our cycle of learning and love continued. I learned that sometimes the simplest moments are the ones that teach us the most. That true love doesn't require grand gestures, but constant presence and understanding. If you have ever been through something similar, you know that these small changes can have a profound and lasting impact. In the end, I realized that the true wealth of a family lies in the stories we tell and the bonds we strengthen. My daughter, my mother, and I, 3 generations united by a love that transcends time and differences. And it is this heritage of love and understanding that I wish to pass on, so that it continues to illuminate the path for future generations. At the end of the day, when everyone was getting ready for bed, my daughter came to me and said, "Mummy, I'm happy we're part of this story." And with a tight hug, I knew we were on the right path, building a narrative of love and empathy, brick by brick, day by day. That night, while the house was steeped in silence, I sat at the kitchen table, reflecting on everything we had experienced in recent times. The transformations in our family were silent but powerful, like the gentle waves that slowly mold a rock. I thought about how love, in its purest form, was capable of healing wounds we didn't even know were there. And this is where things get even deeper. I began to realize that every conversation, every gesture, was a piece of a bigger puzzle, which united not only our little family, but also the generations that came before us. If you have ever found yourself reflecting on the legacy you wish to leave, you know how important it is to cultivate these moments of connection. Life goes by fast, and we often set aside what really matters. The next morning, I decided to write a letter to my daughter, something she could keep and revisit whenever she needed a reminder of what truly matters. "Dear," I began, "life is made up of simple moments that, when added together, create a rich and meaningful story. Never forget that you are loved for who you are, not for what you do." As I wrote, silent tears rolled down my face. Not of sadness, but of gratitude for having the chance to pass on these feelings and teachings. It was as if I was speaking not only to her, but also to the child I once was, and to all the women who came before us, carrying their own stories of love and struggle. Later that day, as we walked through the park, my daughter held my hand and said, "Mum, do you think we could make a family story album?" The idea surprised me, but it made perfect sense. "Of course, dear," I replied, excited. "We can start with the stories your grandmother told us." And so we began our project. Together, we gathered old photos, memories, and little anecdotes that captured the essence, who we were and where we came from. With each page we created, we felt a deeper connection to our roots. My daughter loved hearing about the adventures of my childhood, about how my mother used to tell me stories before bed, and about how each of those stories carried a bit of wisdom. "It's like we're building a bridge to the past," she said one day while we were pasting an old photo in the album. And it was during this process that I realized something even more significant. We were not only preserving memories but also creating new ones. Every moment we spent together, each story we shared was a new page in the book of our family. And if you've experienced something similar, you know how powerful that can be. As the days went by, our album started to take on a life of its own. My daughter, with her endless curiosity, began asking deeper questions about the choices my mother and I made throughout our lives. "Do you think Grandma had to give up a lot of things?" she asked one time, while carefully flipping through the pages. "I think we all make difficult choices," I replied, trying to convey the complexity of life in a way she could understand. These conversations led us to even deeper reflections on the sacrifices and struggles our ancestors faced so that we could be here today. And it's a point that deserves our attention. How each generation paves the way for the next, often with efforts that go unnoticed. Every choice we make is a piece of a larger puzzle, I explained. And it's important to recognize and honor those choices. Our album, now almost complete, had become a source of pride and gratitude. Each page was a testimony to the love that permeates our lives, sometimes invisibly, but always present. And through this process, my daughter learned a valuable lesson, that love and understanding are the true legacies we pass on. At the end of it all, when I look at our small family, I see not only the present, but also a thread of love and resilience that connects us to the past and projects us into the future. And if you've ever found yourself thinking about how you want to be remembered, you know that these stories and bonds are what truly matter. As we closed the album together, my daughter looked at me and said, "Mummy, I'm glad we're part of this story." And at that moment, I knew we were on the right path, building a legacy of love, understanding, and empathy, one day at a time. And so we continue with the certainty that every step we take is a step toward a brighter future for all the generations to come. That morning, as the sun timidly peeked through the curtains, I felt a gentle warmth enveloping the house. It was as if each ray of light was blessing us with new hope. My daughter, still sleepy, stretched out in the chair beside me and smiled. "Mummy, do you think one day I will tell these stories to my children?" The question, so innocent and full of future, touched me deeply. "I believe so, dear," I said, thinking about how stories have the power to cross generations, carrying pieces of who we are. We decided that day would be dedicated to exploring new stories. We left home with a family album under our arm, heading to my grandmother's house, an inexhaustible source of memories and lessons. Upon arriving there, we were welcomed with her warm embrace and the comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee. My grandmother, with her wise eyes, led us to the living room where time seemed to have stopped, preserving memories in every corner. We sat on the couch, and my daughter, curious as always, began to flip through the album. "Grandma, what's your favorite story from here?" she asked, pointing to an old black and white photo. My grandmother smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening fondly. "Ah, this photo was taken in the summer of 1945, she began, her voice filled with nostalgia. She told us about a time when things were different, how life was simple and, at the same time, challenging. As we listened, I realized that these stories weren't just about the past, but also about what shaped us and made us who we are today. Each tale was a piece of a puzzle that formed the identity of our family. My daughter, fascinated, listened intently, absorbing every detail as if uncovering a hidden treasure. "Have you ever thought about this before?" I asked her, as my grandmother paused to take a sip of coffee. She nodded, her eyes shining with new understanding. The afternoon passed quickly, filled with laughter, stories, and reflections. Before we said our goodbyes, my grandmother gifted us a box full of old letters, written by her and members of our family over the years. These letters, she said, are pieces of our history. Keep them with care. We took the gift home, feeling the weight and importance of the legacy entrusted to us. When we arrived, we decided to dedicate our evening to reading those letters. Sitting on the living room floor, we began to unfold the papers, yellowed with time. Each letter told a different story, revealing the feelings, hopes, and dreams of those who had written them. My daughter, with her small fingers, caressed the words as if she could absorb the essence of those who came before us. "Does this remind you of any situation?" I asked, wanting to know how she was processing it all. She looked at me, thoughtful, and replied, "It's as if I could feel what they felt, as if the words were a bridge to the past." Her insight surprised me, and I realized that despite her young age, she was beginning to understand the value of stories and the connections they create. It's worth reflecting on that, I thought, as we continued to explore the past through the letters. With each line read, our understanding of our family deepened. The stories were not just of triumphs, but also of challenges and perseverance. They showed us that love and resilience were constants in our lineage, and that each generation had its own way of contributing to the family legacy. It's funny how, even without knowing them, I feel like I already love them, said my daughter, her soft voice echoing in the room. At the end of the night, as we put the letters back in the box, I realized we had created something special, an invisible bond that connected us to all the generations that came before us. It was a feeling of belonging, of being part of something bigger than ourselves. Do you think we'll ever write our own letters someday? My daughter asked, her endless curiosity sparking inspiration in me. Yes, dear, I replied, smiling. I think we should start now. We grabbed paper and pen, and together we began to write our own stories, our thoughts and hopes for the future. Each word we wrote was a brick in the legacy we wished to leave behind. And so that night, amidst laughter and confidences, we began to create a new chapter in our family's history. As I lay down, I felt a deep peace. I knew we were on the right path, building a future where love and understanding would be the pillars of our family. And if you've ever felt this way, you know there's nothing more rewarding than knowing you're contributing to a legacy of love and connection. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of renewal and purpose. As I was preparing breakfast, my mind wandered through the stories we had read and the letters we had started writing. Each word, each line was a reminder that we were weaving the thread of our own story, a fabric that extended beyond us, connecting us to a rich past and a promising future. My daughter, still sleepy, joined me at the table, her eyes shining with the expectation of a new day. "Mum, can we continue writing our letters tonight?" she asked, her contagious enthusiasm making me smile. "Of course, dear," I replied, feeling grateful for her insatiable curiosity and the bond we were building. In the afternoon, we decided to visit a local museum that housed an exhibition about the history of our city. I wanted my daughter to see how individual stories intertwined to form the narrative of an entire community. As we walked through the galleries, she absorbed every detail, her incessant questions revealing a genuine desire to understand the world around her. "Have you ever wondered what things were like back then?" I asked, encouraging her to imagine the lives of those who came before us. She stopped in front of an old black and white photograph, her eyes fixed on the faces staring back at us from the past. "They look so different, but at the same time, I feel like we could be friends," she commented, her perception surprising me once again. "That's true," I replied, thinking about how, despite the differences in time and space, human connections remain universal. When we got back home, my daughter was excited to share her discoveries with my mother. "Grandma, today we learned about how the city grew and changed over time," she said, her eyes shining with the excitement of a new understanding. My mother smiled, a gleam of pride in her eyes. "It's wonderful to see you so interested in history," she replied, encouraging her to continue exploring. That night, as we sat down to write more letters, my daughter paused and looked at me, her expression serious. "Mum, do you think that when I grow up, I'll remember all of this?" The depth of her question touched me, and I took a moment to respond. "I think so, dear. And even if you don't remember all the details, what matters is the feeling, the love, and the connection we are building together." With that certainty, we went back to writing, each line capturing a moment of our lives, a thought or a wish that we hoped to pass on. I knew that these letters, just like the ones we received from my grandmother, would be a treasure for the future, a tangible reminder of our love and our shared history. As we wrote, I realized that we were not only documenting our present, but also creating a legacy that transcended time. And if you have ever found yourself reflecting on what you want to leave for future generations, you know that these small actions can have a lasting impact. Days passed, and each moment together became an opportunity to learn and grow. My daughter, now more aware of her roots, began to see the world with new eyes. Her experiences enriched by the knowledge of our family stories. Mum, do you think our letters will inspire someone in the future? She asked, her voice filled with hope. I'm sure they will, I replied, feeling confidence in my words. I knew that no matter where the future took us, we were planting seeds of love and understanding that would bloom in the generations to come. That weekend, we decided to gather the whole family for a special dinner, a moment to celebrate not only the present, but also the path we have walked together. My mother and my grandmother were there, their presence bringing a sense of continuity and belonging. As we sat at the table, my daughter, with her bright eyes, stood up and said, I'm happy that we're part of this story together. And so, amidst laughter and shared memories, I realized that the true legacy was not just in the written words or the stories told, but in the moments lived, the bonds we cultivate, and the love that permeates every interaction. If you have ever felt this kind of connection, you know it is the essence of what truly matters in life. That night, as we were saying our goodbyes, my mother hugged me and whispered, Thank you for keeping these stories alive. I felt grateful for the opportunity to be part of something so meaningful. And I knew that together, we were building a future where love and understanding would always be the pillars. And so we moved forward with the certainty that every step we take is a step toward a brighter future for all the generations to come. The next morning, as the sun rose timidly, reflecting its soft colors through the kitchen window, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My daughter, still with her hair tousled from sleep, joined me for breakfast. There was something special about those quiet moments, where silence was filled only by the sound of the world awakening around us. Do you think our stories will continue even when we're no longer here? Her question, filled with innocence and depth, took me by surprise. Yes, dear, I replied with a gentle smile. Stories live in every person who hears them and carries them in their heart. We decided that day would be dedicated to exploring more about our family. We went to my mother's house, bringing our story album and the letters we had started writing. Upon arriving, we were greeted by her warm and welcoming presence. I'm curious to see what you brought, she said, with a gleam in her eyes that only anticipation can bring. We sat in the living room and my daughter began to show the album, explaining each story with contagious enthusiasm. My mother listened attentively, her hands gently caressing the pages as if she were touching not just paper, but living memories. You did a wonderful job, she praised, visibly moved. As we flipped through the pages, my mother began to share some stories we had not heard before. Tales of her youth, the challenges she faced, and the joys she found along the way. These are the stories that shape us, she commented, looking at my daughter. And these are what you will pass on. After a delicious lunch, we decided to venture into the attic, where my mother kept boxes of old memories. It was a space full of history, where every corner seemed to whisper secrets of the past. We found photo albums, letters, and objects that belonged to previous generations. Does this remind you of any situation? I asked my daughter, as she held an old pocket watch. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the stopped hands, imagining the lives the object had touched. It's like each thing here has a story to tell, she said, her soft voice echoing through the attic. And in that moment, I realized we were not just rediscovering our past, but also creating new memories. We spent the afternoon immersed in discoveries, each new piece of history connecting us more deeply. At the end of the day, we returned to the living room, our hands laden with treasures from the past. My mother, with a serene smile, suggested that we make a mural with some of the photos and letters we found. It will be a constant reminder of who we are and where we came from, she explained. We spent the night putting together the mural, each photo carefully placed, each letter read and reread before being pinned. As we worked, my daughter looked at me and said, Mum, I think I understand now. No matter what happens, we will always have our stories. Her words, so simple and true, touched my heart. That night, before going to bed, my daughter came to me with a new idea. Can we start writing a book of our family's stories? She asked, her voice filled with enthusiasm and hope. Of course, dear, I replied, hugging her warmly. It will be a wonderful project with this new mission in mind. We fell asleep with the certainty that we were weaving a legacy that would transcend time. And if you've ever found yourself reflecting on what you want to leave for the future, you know that these little actions, These moments of connection are what really matter. In the days that followed, we began working on our storybook. Each chapter was a journey through time, capturing the essence of our experiences, our lessons learned, and our dreams for the future. My daughter, with her vivid imagination, added her own tales and reflections, creating a rich and vibrant tapestry. As we wrote, I realized that we were not only documenting our history, but also strengthening the bonds that united us. It was a process of healing and discovery, where each word written was a step towards a deeper understanding of who we were. And so, we moved forward, confident that each page we added to our book was a tribute to the love, resilience, and connection we shared. We knew that, regardless of where life took us, these stories would always guide us, reminding us that we are part of something greater than ourselves. If you have ever felt this way, you know there is nothing more gratifying than contributing to a legacy of love and understanding. And it is this legacy that I hope my daughter carries with her as she continues to write her own story one day at a time. The next morning, as the gentle sunlight poured in through the window, my daughter and I settled once again at the breakfast table, the aroma of freshly toasted bread filling the air. "Mum, do you think one day our descendants will read our book and feel connected to us?" Her question, so genuine and full of hope, made me smile. "I am sure they will, honey," I replied, thinking about how each word we wrote was a bridge to the future. We decided that day would be dedicated to a new adventure. My daughter suggested we visit the city library to research more about local history and perhaps find new elements for our book. When we arrived, we were greeted by the welcoming silence of the shelves filled with books. My daughter, with her curious eyes, began to explore each section, her nimble hands flipping through history books and biographies. As she delved into a new discovery, I sat in a nearby armchair and watched her, admiring her enthusiasm and thirst for knowledge. Have you ever felt this way before? I asked myself, recalling the days of my own childhood, when curiosity led me to explore the world around me. It was comforting to see my daughter embark on a similar path, guided by her own questions and curiosities. Back at our work table at home, we began to incorporate the new information we had gathered. My daughter was especially excited about a story she had discovered about a former resident of the city, whose courage and determination had left a lasting impact on the community. "Mum, can we write about him? I believe his story deserves to be remembered," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I agreed immediately, seeing an opportunity not only to enrich our book, but also to teach the importance of recognizing the value of people who help shape the world around us. "Of course, dear," I replied, as we began to outline a new chapter, intertwining historical facts with a touch of imagination. As the days passed, our book began to take shape, each page reflecting the love and dedication we were investing in our journey. The stories we wrote were more than simple accounts. They were a tribute to the resilience and strength that each generation brings with it. If you have ever been involved in such a significant project, you know how rewarding it is to see something grow and develop before your eyes. One afternoon, as we were reviewing what we had written, my daughter stopped and looked at me, her expression serious. "Mum, do you think one day I will tell these stories to my children?" The depth of her question touched me, and I took a moment to respond. "I think so, dear. And when that happens, you will be continuing the tradition we started together." And so, we continued to write, each word a promise that our legacy of love and understanding would live on through the generations. We knew that, although time passed and circumstances changed, the stories we shared would always keep us united. With each page we added, we felt a deeper connection not only to our history, but also to the future we were helping to build. And if you have ever felt this way, you know there is nothing more powerful than knowing you are contributing to something greater than yourself. At the end of another productive day, my daughter came up to me and hugged me. "I'm happy we're part of this story," she said, her voice soft and full of love. And at that moment, I knew we were on the right path, building a legacy that would transcend time, one day at a time. As the night progressed, the silent comfort of the house enveloped us, and I felt a deep gratitude for this journey we were sharing. I knew that, regardless of the challenges that arose, we had a solid foundation built on love, understanding, and the stories that had shaped us. And it is this certainty that I will carry with me, knowing that together we are writing a future full of promises and possibilities. Before you leave, do 2 things now. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive the next messages. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. To continue, watch the next video. It's already in the cards and also in the description.